floods between rural and urban area, only that limited studies are existing in maybe rural and urban, but yet they have not even systematized vulnerability. They have not come up with indicators which can be used to assess vulnerability. So lack of studies like this one in vulnerability assessment and prediction means that Malawi as a country is lacking a strategy to invest the scarce resources that we have. And at the same time, the DRM in Malawi is a post-humanitarian action focusing on relief activities and not in DRR as an intervention in flood management. And at the same time, because of lack of studies like this one, Malawi lack a scientific data and framework which can be utilizing in planning and policy making. Hence, because necessitated with this problem, this study was carried in order to address those gaps, so that I contribute to systematize, I contribute to assess, and I contribute to come up with a vulnerability assessment framework through a prediction of the same. So a research objective, as I've already mentioned that this is just an abstract, is to predict households' vulnerability to floods in Lilongwe City and KARONGA district based on underlying vulnerability factors which I'm describing as UVF, physical, social, economic, environmental, and cultural, as well as vulnerability components which are abbreviated as VC, which are referred to as exposure, susceptibility, and resilience. Significance of this study. Why this study is important? This study in this objective, by the way, this study in this objective, it will contribute to add knowledge and provide scientific data which is missing in the country in terms of vulnerability assessment. And in this way, this study is responding to the international call, which is the Sendai Framework for Action which is running from 2015 to 2030. And at the same time, it is responding to the National Disaster Risk Management Policy, which is a Malawi National Disaster Risk Management Policy 2015. Importantly, if this study is not done, as the case now in Malawi, flood management will remain to be ad hoc. That is to say, we will not be focusing on proactive, we will be focusing on relief and humanitarian action, and DRR will not be planned, and we will not be focusing on DRR, rather we will be focusing on intervention during floods. Once floods have happened, we go and respond. If this study is not there, DRR efficiency and effectiveness will be questioned. Because in most cases, when you read policies, they will say you cannot implement any disaster risk reduction when you have not assessed vulnerability. You need to assess vulnerability and then later go and implement disaster risk reduction intervention. Again, if this study is not there, policy and framework will be contrasted. If you are looking at policy, you try to analyze policies, they will say always vulnerability will support disaster risk reduction. So it's like you have to do vulnerability, you have to know what people are facing, and then you go and intervene. So policy will be contrasted, and therefore daily administrative will also be a problem. And the lack of study like this one will lead to limited lack of indicators to be utilized in the policy and the planning framework, like in the National Disaster Risk Management Policy, in the National Resilience Policy, National Contingency Plan, and the City District plans. Theoretical underpinnings, this study used the two theories, the PAR model and the Salami model, which is Urban Flood Vulnerability Assessment Framework, which was carried in Nigeria. And simply the PAR model says that vulnerability will happen due to three processes. There is a process of dynamic pressure, there is a process of root causes, and there is a process of unsafe conditions. So it gives the equation that in most cases for a disaster to happen, there is H times V, which is hazard times vulnerability, equation 1. And the problem with this model, which I've analyzed fully, is that it does not give an outcome on how you can reduce that vulnerability. And as a result of that, I've generated, from this model, I've generated a new model. From the same model, I've generated a new model which is trying to come up with DRR, which is disaster risk reduction, equals reduced hazard times reduced vulnerability. That is according to Mwalwimba 2020, because I have a publication on the same which I published in 2020. So one should not question. So again, the link why I used the urban flood vulnerability assessment framework was that this framework has properly linked the relationship between exposure and physical drivers, susceptibility and social drivers, resilience and economic drivers, which are key in this study you see as we proceed. But the problem with this model has not included the cultural or human factors, and it just includes the cultural into social factor. I've separated that, because that is giving that culture or human factor is not properly analyzed. So in my study, I have separated that, so it means culture is a separate entity in my study. Materials and methods, I used the cross-sectional survey to collect data through quantitative methods. But in terms of approach, this research was approached both using the social science perspective and the technocentric perspective. However, more emphasis was given on the social science perspective, because when you are reading policies, you find that technocentric perspective has been criticized to say it gives more solutions on engineering. While the engineering solutions are good, we say no, like construction of dikes and like, but we say no, the social science perspective gives much emphasis on policy interventions in relation to management of floods. So the more emphasis is on the social science, while also I'm taking a part on the technocentric solutions. So the study area was the LILONGWE city, specifically in Untitled Chapter, and the KARONGA district, specifically in TH Rupura. And in the ward I sampled the senior chief Chiboneka, and in that case I sampled the GVH Martin Makasangira. So justification as to why this and why that. In LILONGWE, floods are the new phenomenon, and therefore I wanted to understand what are the causes of vulnerability, and the DRR strategies in LILONGWE normally they are not targeted, and when it comes to flood vulnerability assessment has been neglected, while KARONGA floods are something which is common, known, but people have accepted to stay with them. So I wanted to understand what is the level of their vulnerability, why are they accepting to stay with floods, yet maybe we may think that they are accepting while maybe the level of vulnerability is not high. So I wanted to understand it from that perspective. And at the same time, flood vulnerability assessment is very sporadic, and mostly KARONGA is classified as a prone district by Dodima. Then these are study area. You proceed. So these are study area, LILONGWE, and proceed. So when it comes to target population, when as I've already mentioned, I targeted households in Tandile in Senior Chief Chiboneka, and I used the random sampling, and the households were determined based on distance to Lingazi River or Lingazi Basin area. Data was collected using structured questionnaire survey, which was programmed in COBOL. And the data collection instruments included GPS and tablets. So that's Android tablets. So it's the same. It's because it's like more or less a comparative one. So it's the same. The only difference is that here I targeted the households in Makasangira, but all are the same. I had to do exactly the same thing because it's somehow a comparative analysis. In terms of sample size, that is the formula which I used, the Fischer Formula. And why I used the Fischer Formula in terms of determining this. Normally the Fischer Formula can be applied when either you know the target population or you don't know. If you know the target population, then you can page your population that you are going to sample should not be less than 10%. If you don't know the target population, the author has provided that you can use 0.5, which is 50%. Therefore, in Lilongwe, I do not know the target population in terms of how many people are affected by floods. Therefore, I used 50. While in Karonga, I already had it because I carried a certain study which I made the publication, so I knew the target population. Therefore, I used the 0.2, which is 20%. So in that case, I generated Using that, I generated Lilongwe 384 and Karonga 244. But during the data collection, I managed to collect in Lilongwe 345, and Karonga I managed to collect 200. In terms of variables, as I've already mentioned, I grouped in this objective, which is part of my full research report. I classified them into two: the underlying vulnerability factors, which were acting as response variables, and the vulnerability components, which were acting as predictor variables. So in the underlying vulnerability factors, we had the physical, the social, the economic, environmental, and cultural. We see some attributes like physical. Most of the attributes of the physical factors were relating to infrastructure standards, and the social were relating with the capacity to cope with a situation, and sometimes availability of social services. The economic were to do with the income, level of the households, the high income generating activities, poverty, among others. The environmental were related to pressure on cultivated land, environmental mismanagement, whatever, including land management issues. And then cultural also included issues to do with cultural conflicts, growth of informal settlement, absence of personal responsibility, and in vulnerability components, exposure was related to geography, topography of an area, and other housing conditions. Susceptibility included access to communication, and resilience also followed the issues to do with income level of households and farm crops. Again, it was also imperative for me to associate the confounding factors or confounding variables. In this case, the confounding variables, I am looking at the demographic variables because they will provide an explanation as to why this one is vulnerable to A and not that one vulnerable to B. So I had to consider that one. So age, marital status, education, sex, occupation were considered because according to BAC 2010, it says these are the most common confounding demographic variables that can be used to predict vulnerability. So they were also associated with the underlying vulnerability factors to determine which demographic characteristics contribute to vulnerability. Data variables and their measurements, and their associations. I associated the physical versus exposure. So the resultant of that association gave me the physical exposure factors, which is referred as PEF. And I associated the social versus susceptibility. In that regards, I got the social susceptibility factors. I associated economic versus resilience, and I got that one. I associated the environmental with the exposure, and I got that one. And I associated the cultural versus susceptibility, and I got that relationship. And now how did I conduct the prediction of vulnerability? So I had to standardize the data from the survey. After calculating the percentages, I had to standardize. So standardization, I used that formula indicator with the subscript of very important, because I was only taking any variable that was in the category of very important, because that's the scale which I used. Very important, important, and less what? Important in terms of contributing to vulnerability. So in that case, I got that one, divide by 100% to get the result. And that indicator, it means it was replicated. This is just a formula. Let's say, for example, I substitute physical there, and what is the variable in physical, then I could substitute whether it's to do with maybe construction standards, whatever, to generate that one. And after I did that, I had to subject that, I had to check whether that indicator or that that indicator in that particular variable was able to fall in one of the categories which this author Barika used to determine vulnerability using what we call flood vulnerability index, FVI, and then this is the index which is very low vulnerability to floods, which is in 0.0119, and low vulnerability to floods is in 0.2 to 0.39. Vulnerability to floods is 0.4 to 0.59. High vulnerability to floods is 0.6 to 0.79, and a very high vulnerability to floods is 0.8 to 1. So it's a scale which is used 0 to 1 to determine vulnerability factor, which factor is contributing to high vulnerability to floods. Then from there I had to generate a model which is binomial logit multiple regression model with that formula, and where J is a predictor value. In this predictor I had to select a variable from either exposure, susceptibility, and resilience, and the beta in this case was intercept value, which was generated by the equation itself, and then the phi was a response variable. In this case, the response variable were the variables that were selected from the physical, social, economic, environmental, and cultural. And the O operator, the operator were the measurement scale which I used, either very important, less important, and important. And the E was an error in that category. So from the model had to generate single value in the categories of the physical exposure factors, the social susceptibility factors, the resilience factors, the environmental exposure factors, and the cultural susceptibility factors. I had to generate a single value from that one. The single value that was generated from that one, from those categories, I had to obtain a value by calibrating that value using that formula. Just for example, P, which is in this case meaning physical factors, is equal to PF, which is the physical exposure factors value which was generated times 100% over the sample size, either in Lilongwe or KARONGA, depending where I was making that calculation. And then this formula was replicated for social, so it was just a matter of substituting where there is physical, put social, and where there is PF, put the social susceptibility factors. And I continued. So finally, after doing that, the value that was obtained from that one was then calibrated in the formula FVL, which is vulnerability, flood vulnerability level, is equal to PF over 100, meaning, just an example, again it was replicated to say where there is PF, in case I want to calculate for physical, for social, I will substitute there SSF. If I want for this, I will substitute, so it was just duplicated to other whatever. So finally, after computing all these scores, then I had to make a prediction of vulnerability. Yes? Next. And then how data was analyzed, I used the ALA software. And normally what I did in ALA, there were about, I think, four important things. One, I had to calculate the univariate, that's descriptive statistics, to do with percentages, tables, and graphs. And then I had also to work on the single p-values, where I was checking associations between a variable to a variable, and then I had to do the combined p-values. After calculating the single p-values, I had to calculate the combined p-values. So in that case, then I had to work on the equationomatic package, which was used to generate the model which I've presented, and was summed by library so that I could generate the model and then come up with the predictions. Then that's how, because this is a study which is carried at Mzuni, I had to get a permission from the Mzuni Ethical Committee, which is called Mzuni-Lek, and then later on that committee, the Ethical Committee was given to the CEO of Lilongwe and the DC of KARONGA, and then they had to give me an authority to go and conduct the data in the area, to conduct the survey in the area of my interest, and households were also assured of an confidentiality. Next. So results. In terms of results, the relationship of demographics and underlying vulnerability factors. So I had to associate, as I've already mentioned. Age proved that no any vulnerability factor, whether in KARONGA or Lilongwe, was an individual household is not vulnerable by what? Age. Proved to say age was not correlating to any particular vulnerability factor. Sex was correlating with the physical factor in KARONGA, not in Lilongwe, and the social factor in KARONGA, not in Lilongwe, economic factor in KARONGA, not in Lilongwe, while in Lilongwe, sex correlated with environmental factors, and sex correlated with human or cultural factors in Lilongwe, rather in KARONGA. So it means in Lilongwe it was only one. Education correlated with the social factors in Lilongwe, and correlated with economic factors in Lilongwe, and correlated again with economic factors in KARONGA, and correlated with the environmental factors in Lilongwe, and then marital status was also correlating with the physical factors in Lilongwe and KARONGA, and Lilongwe again on economic factors, environmental factors in Lilongwe, and in KARONGA it was cultural factors. While occupation only correlated with economic factors in Lilongwe and cultural factors in KARONGA. When it comes to factors, underlying physical factors contributing to vulnerability, those that were found to be high in the category of very important, that's a scale of very important, included the poor construction of infrastructure facilities both in Lilongwe and KARONGA, and a lack of construction materials both in Lilongwe and KARONGA, and while construction of roads, homes and other infrastructures was only high in Lilongwe and less important in KARONGA, as you can see somewhere only that I don't have a pointer. Yeah, as you can see, the blue one is indicating less important, while the one with the other car, the red one, is indicating important, and the other one with that color is indicating very what? Important. So that's on physical factors. Next. On social vulnerability factors, again, we are looking at you are looking at the lack of human rights in Lilongwe was not very much, but it was very much in KARONGA, that's 66%, while lack of access to health services was very both high in Lilongwe with 62% and in KARONGA with 73%. Next. When it comes to economic vulnerability factors, you look at poverty was high in Lilongwe with 73%, and again poverty in KARONGA with 68%. And when it comes to lack of alternatives livelihoods, both in Lilongwe and KARONGA were above 50, like in Lilongwe it was 54%, and in KARONGA it was 71%. When it comes to environmental vulnerability factors, here pressure on cultivated land was not an issue in Lilongwe because it was less than 50%, which was my cutoff. And in KARONGA it was an issue, with 70%. While when it comes to environmental mismanagement, in Lilongwe it was also an issue with 60%, and in Karonga with 62%. When it comes to poor land management, in Karonga was an issue, 55%, and in Lilongwe it was 56%. When it comes to inappropriate use of resources, rather, when it comes to inappropriate use of resources, in Lilongwe it was 56%, while in Karonga it was 64% on environmental. And when it comes to cultural factors, all those that were used as operators for, in actual sense, were used as operators for cultural factors, only the population growth was shown in Lilongwe as contributing to vulnerability. You can see the very high, which is the blue one, whether it's blue, that's blue one. So that is Lilongwe. But Karonga with the red one, it shows very less. It's very, that's not important. Less important to contribute to vulnerability when it comes to population growth. So next. Now, after doing that, I had to work on the relationship between underlying vulnerability factors and CV, which is vulnerability components. And in that case, what I generated was geography was not significant in a combined, was not significant in Lilongwe, while in Karonga it was significant. House type was significant in Lilongwe and also significant in Karonga, while roofing material was significant in Lilongwe and not significant in Karonga. That was associating physical and exposure. When after associating social versus acceptability, I got access to communication to be significant in Lilongwe at p-value 0.05 and significant in Karonga at the same p-value, but not significant to health, to access to health care, education, health care, and as well as education in Lilongwe, while significant in Karonga. Access to water and sanitation was not significant in Lilongwe, but significant in Karonga. Well, next. When it comes to economic vulnerability versus resilience, income level of household was significant in Lilongwe as well as in Karonga. Not significant was loss of livestock in Lilongwe, but in Karonga it was significant. Staple crop affected was not significant in Lilongwe, but it was significant in Karonga. Loss of food stock was not significant in Lilongwe, but it was significant in Karonga. Then environmental versus exposure, geography again there come was some significant in Lilongwe and significant in Karonga. House type not significant in Lilongwe, not significant in Karonga. Roofing material not significant in Lilongwe, not significant in Karonga. When it comes to cultural versus accessibility, communication accessibility proved to be significant in Lilongwe and significant in Karonga. Education facility proved not significant in Lilongwe and not significant in Karonga. Health facility not significant in Lilongwe and not significant in Karonga. Now, prediction of vulnerability. After working out all those things, I had to predict vulnerability. Which factor then? Using that model. So the association of physical and exposure generated in that model gave me a score of 50% in Lilongwe, 52% rather in Lilongwe, which was equivalent to using the formulas which are provided there. It gave me a 0.52 in the index of vulnerability, flood vulnerability index scale. And in Karonga it gives me 64, which gave me 0.64 in the scale of what? Vulnerability, flood vulnerability. And then social associating with susceptibility gave me a 19.75 in Lilongwe, which gave me 0.2 in a scale of FVI, and in Karonga it gave me 61%, which gave me a scale gave me 0.61 in a scale of FVI. Economic Resilience Association gave me 60%, which gave me 0.6, and in Karonga it gave me 80.22, which gave me something like 8.222, so I just equated to be 0.8. Environmental and Exposure gave me 96 in LILONGWE, which gave me 0.9, and then